Before an inmate ever sets foot inside Pelican Bay State Prison, California's most feared supermax, they must survive a hidden transfer pipeline more secretive than the prison itself. Today we're pulling back the curtain on the buses, protocols and high-risk movements that shape the journey into the state's most notorious facility. And before we begin, hit that subscribe button because we bring you the stories no one else will touch. For thousands of inmates scattered across California's sprawling prison system, the most terrifying words aren't shouted in a riot, whispered in a gang meeting, or printed on a disciplinary report. They come quietly, often before sunrise, spoken by a correctional officer who doesn't bother turning on the lights. Pack up. You're transferring. The inmates know what that means. The only question is where. California runs more than 24 state prisons, each with its own internal culture, politics, and reputation. But one name travels through the cell blocks like a superstition, spoken with low voices and colder eyes: Pelican Bay. Not just a prison, a destination for the most violent, most defiant, and most influential men in the system. So when an inmate hears, "pack up," the body reacts before the brain does. The adrenaline comes first, then the questions. Did someone snitch on me? Did the gang politics shift? Did a classification officer flag my file? Am I being buried alive up north? Inside the cell, officers wait silently, watching. They've seen every reaction: denial, bargaining, cursing, prayers whispered into cupped hands. But the rules are the rules. A transfer order is final. No appeal, no warning, no explanation until the paperwork is already in motion. And when the Pelican Bay box is checked, the entire process changes. Unlike routine transfers between medium-security prisons, a Pelican Bay transfer begins with a detailed institutional classification committee review, where an inmate's entire history, every fight, every gang link, every confidential informant note, is scrutinized. Pelican Bay doesn't accept men casually. It was designed for control, and every space inside its walls is reserved for inmates considered unmanageable anywhere else. Once the decision is made, secrecy takes over. Transfers to Pelican Bay are never announced ahead of time, not even internally. Correctional staff operate on a strict need-to-know basis. This prevents word from leaking out to inmate networks, because even a hint is enough to trigger retaliation, escape planning, or gang-ordered chaos. This is why inmates are taken so abruptly. Most are awakened between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., the period when cell blocks are quietest, and the prison's internal communication system has the least traffic. Officers escort them through darkened corridors, out of range of most other inmates. The goal is to make the transfer clean, avoiding confrontation, avoiding spectacle. Inmates call this phase the ghost run. A move that happens silently, invisibly, like they're being erased. After a strip search and property inventory, they're put in transport restraints, the infamous trifold: cuffs, waist chain, and leg irons cinched tight. Some men refuse to show fear. Others shake uncontrollably as the leg irons click shut. A few whisper promises into the air, telling themselves they'll survive whatever waits for them up north. But the truth reaches them eventually. Once that bus door closes, your life as you know it is over. Because Pelican Bay isn't just another yard. It's a place designed to break the strongest men the system has ever produced. The inmates know it. The staff know it. And everyone understands that the transfer itself is only the beginning. Outside, the transport bus waits, engine running, lights off, flanked by armed officers. Its destination isn't printed on the exterior, but every man boarding recognizes it by reputation alone. The journey to the end of California begins here. The transport yard is colder than the inmates expect. Even in the inland prisons where summer temperatures scorch the concrete by noon, the pre-dawn hours carry a sting. Officers guide the shackled line toward a vehicle that every Californian has seen on the highways, but few truly understand: the CDCR transfer bus. From the outside, it looks like a plain, aging coach, white or off-gray with darkened windows and the seal of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation stenciled on the side. But to the inmates staring at it now, this isn't transportation. It's a boundary line between the world they know and the world where they may spend the rest of their lives. Inside the bus there are no comfortable seats. Rows of metal frame chairs are bolted to the floor. Some buses have plexiglass dividers separating the front and rear compartments. Others have steel mesh barriers, designed to keep high-risk inmates isolated from one another. Every window is reinforced. Every door is double-latched. And hidden in the ceiling above the driver's seat is a locked compartment holding emergency restraints. When an inmate is heading to Pelican Bay, he's placed in the rear security cage, far from the driver and guarded by an armed officer seated only a few feet away. This cage is more than symbolic. It's the same area used for inmates who have assaulted staff, escaped from transports, or hold positions in powerful prison gangs like the Aryan Brotherhood, Mexican Mafia, and Nuestra Familia. Even among the shackled group boarding today, the Pelican Bay transferees stand out. They're separated, counted twice, and escorted with extra officers. Some attempt to maintain a hardened stare. Others hide their panic behind slow, controlled breathing. But all of them understand what this distance means. The system no longer trusts them among ordinary inmates. The officers call out names, check wristbands, and confirm transfer orders clipped to thick manila envelopes. Every inmate's entire life, criminal history, disciplinary record, gang validation status, travels inside that envelope. And with every step closer to the bus door, the reality settles deeper. You don't get transferred to Pelican Bay for nothing. Inside the bus, the air is stale. A faint smell of metal, rubber from the restraints, and the cold morning dew clings to everything. The men lower themselves into their assigned seats, leg irons jingling in harsh rhythm. The officer in the rear snaps a lock on the cage door and rests a shotgun vertically beside his leg, a silent reminder that escape attempts have happened before. When the bus finally lurches forward, the inmates stare out the darkened windows. The view is distorted, tinted so heavily that the world outside looks like it's fading. The sensation is disorienting. Some have described it as watching your life through a dying TV screen. At the first checkpoint inside the prison's perimeter, officers on the ground give visual clearance. The hydraulic gates open slowly, metal grinding against metal, as if reluctant to let the bus leave. Inmate after inmate watches the yard they once knew shrink behind them. Cell blocks, towers, exercise yards, they all pass in reverse, swallowed by the darkness. Once the gates close, the radio chatter begins. Transport units coordinate with regional offices, nearby prisons, and California Highway Patrol escorts. High-security transfers often require CHP units to trail behind or leapfrog ahead to secure specific highway stretches. The goal is simple: prevent ambushes, escape attempts, or orchestrated attacks from the outside. Because it has happened before. More than once in California's history, gang members on the streets have attempted to free one of their own during transport. These attempts failed, but the message was clear. No Pelican Bay transfer is taken lightly. The bus accelerates onto the highway. The inmates can't tell the direction, not at first. But after an hour, the smell of salty coastal air fades, the heat rises, or the fog thickens depending on where the transfer began. Eventually, someone whispers what everyone is already thinking. They're taking us north. The men fall silent. Northern California isn't just geographically distant. For inmates, it represents psychological distance. The farther north you go, the fewer people you know, the fewer favors you can call in, the fewer connections you can rely on. Pelican Bay itself sits near the Oregon border, closer to redwood forests and small logging towns than any major California city. As the miles stretch, the road becomes emptier. Civilization thins. Cell towers disappear. The radio chatter slows. The bus moves into territory where escape is nearly impossible and help, even for staff, is far away. Some inmates close their eyes. Others try to track the direction of the sun. But one way or another, they all know the truth. The farther this bus goes, the closer they are to the place known for ending reputations, careers, and sometimes sanity. The road to Pelican Bay has begun. The further the transport bus pushes into Northern California, the more the landscape changes, not just visually but psychologically. Most inmates have spent years in the dense urban sprawl of Southern California or the Central Valley's flat, endless grid of farmland. But as the bus climbs into the northern corridor, civilization thins into a sparse ribbon of small towns, truck stops, and long stretches of forest-lined highway. For inmates heading to Pelican Bay, this isolation is no accident. The prison's location, near the tiny coastal town of Crescent City, was chosen deliberately. When it opened in 1989, state officials wanted a facility so remote, so distant from gang hubs and urban centers, that outside interference would be nearly impossible. And for inmates being transferred today, that remoteness becomes increasingly real with every passing mile. Inside the bus, the temperature drops. Fog creeps over the windows, painting ghostly shapes on the glass. For some inmates, this is their first time experiencing the coastal northern climate, cold, damp, and unpredictable. It's a stark contrast to the oven-hot yards of the desert prisons many came from. Conversation on the bus shifts from speculation to silence. A Pelican Bay transfer has a way of squeezing the noise out of a man. Even those with reputations, shot callers, enforcers, men who've controlled entire yards, begin feeling the weight of the unknown. The Pelican Bay stories start to surface. Not rumors, memories. Someone on the bus has been there before. There's always at least one. A man who survived the SHU, the notorious security housing unit, and was later released to a different prison. The others look to him for truth and he gives it sparingly. The SHU isn't a place, he murmurs from behind the mesh barrier. It's a time machine. You go in and the world forgets you exist. No one laughs. Because the SHU, or the SHU, as inmates call it, is one of the most infamous isolation units in the United States. For decades, men spent years, even decades, in 8 by 10-foot concrete cells with no natural light, no phone calls, and minimal human contact. Many were placed there for gang affiliation rather than specific disciplinary offenses. Some inmates on the bus have already been reviewed for the SHU. Others are headed there automatically due to validation as members of the state's most violent prison gangs. Still others believe they can avoid the SHU if they keep a clean record, though Pelican Bay's definition of clean is far stricter than the rest of California's system. The bus stops only once every few hours and never in areas visible to the public. Official CDCR policy requires transport teams to use secured or restricted zones, back lots of law enforcement buildings, fenced areas at fire stations, or isolated CHP pull-offs. The inmates aren't allowed to exit unless absolutely necessary. Officers stretch, walk perimeter checks, and inspect the bus for tampering, while inmates stay locked inside, shifting painfully in their shackles. On one of these rare stops, an officer steps back onto the bus and closes the door behind him. "All right, listen up," he announces. "We'll be hitting the last stretch soon. Once we pass the Klamath River, it's about 40 more minutes." A murmur ripples through the rear cage. 40 minutes. After hours on the road, sometimes more than 12, the end feels shockingly close. But the man who'd spoken earlier, the one who'd survived Pelican Bay before, leans his head back against the cold window. "That's when it hits you," he says quietly. "That last stretch. When the trees get taller, when the fog gets thicker, when the road narrows, you feel it." "Feel what?" someone asks. "That you're headed to the place where California sends men it doesn't want anywhere else." The bus starts moving again. The engine hum becomes the only constant sound, steady and indifferent. Out the windows, the scenery swells into towering redwoods, their trunks disappearing into the mist like ancient pillars. The wind shakes the bus, and the twisting highway makes the leg irons rattle with each bend. This is Highway 101, one of the most beautiful and desolate roads in the state. And for Pelican Bay transferees, it's the final reminder of just how far from everything they are about to be. A correctional officer up front speaks into his radio. "This is Transport Unit 47. Be advised, we are 10 minutes out from Crescent City. All procedures proceeding normally." Normally. A strange word for a process designed around fear, control, and absolute security. But for these officers, normal means predictable. And predictable means safe. The inmates, however, feel the opposite. With every turn, tension rises. A cold dread settles in the stomach. Because once they arrive, the world as they know it will change instantly. New rules. New hierarchies. New realities. And for some long, suffocating years in the SHU, a faint screech of brakes signals the transition. The bus slows as Crescent City's outskirts appear. Low buildings, mist-covered rooftops, and a horizon swallowed by fog and forest. This is nowhere. And in the middle of nowhere sits the most feared prison in California. The redwoods thin. The road straightens. And finally, Pelican Bay State Prison emerges through the mist like a fortress carved from stone. The journey is over. The real story is about to begin. Pelican Bay doesn't introduce itself gently. The prison appears the way a storm does. Slowly at first, forming in the distance, then suddenly consuming everything in front of you. As the bus pushes deeper into Crescent City's coastal fog, the outlines sharpen. Long concrete walls, guard towers, razor wire gleaming like wet blades under the gray sky. It's not a building. It's a warning carved into the landscape. For inmates, this first sight always hits the same way. A cold, crawling realization that they have arrived at the end of the line. Pelican Bay State Prison was built with intention. Every square foot is designed to eliminate unpredictability and maximize control. The front gate is so heavily reinforced that it resembles a military checkpoint more than a correctional entrance. Opposing walls channel the bus into a narrow approach lane, a choke point engineered to stop attacks and prevent escape. Even the road feels hostile. No traffic. No pedestrians. No sound other than the hiss of the bus brakes and the low hum of the highway behind them. The place feels disconnected from the world, and that disconnection is by design. The bus rolls to a stop at the Sally Port, a double-gated security enclosure. The first steel gate closes behind the bus with a deep mechanical groan. The second gate remains shut until officers on the ground complete a full perimeter sweep. Armed guards and watchtowers scan the scene, rifles trained downward, eyes unblinking. Inside the bus, the inmates feel the shift in atmosphere. This is no longer a transfer. This is an intake into a prison that built its reputation on breaking the will of the most dangerous inmates in California. A correctional sergeant boards the bus. His uniform is crisp and his voice is steady, practiced. He carries the posture of someone who has done this hundreds of times and still treats each transfer with the seriousness it demands. Listen up, he begins. You are entering Pelican Bay State Prison. When you step off this bus, you follow every order exactly as instructed. You do not talk. You do not turn around. You do not look anywhere except where you are directed. Non-compliance will be met with immediate force. Understood. The inmates nod silently. There's no bravado left here. Even those with reputations that once commanded entire yards know better than to challenge Pelican Bay staff. This facility has seen every kind of inmate, hitters, manipulators, escape artists, gang leaders, men with decades of violence behind them. Nothing surprises the officers anymore. One by one, inmates are unloaded. Officers call names, check identification band numbers, and escort each man down the bus steps. The clang of leg irons hitting the pavement echoes across the Sally Port like the sound of dropped chains in a canyon. The fog hangs so thick it feels like a ceiling. Visibility is barely 50 feet, but even through the haze, the vastness of the prison is unmistakable. Massive yards extend outward, separated by towering walls and layers of fencing. The complex sprawls like a small city, if that city were built exclusively to contain the most volatile population imaginable. The entrance procedures begin immediately. Each inmate is placed in a holding cage, a welded steel frame just large enough to stand or sit, but far too small to stretch. Officers read their file notes into handheld recorders. Name, CDCR number, gang validation status, reason for transfer and housing recommendation. 4 Pelican Bay transfers. This part of intake is the most revealing. If the file indicates gang affiliation with one of the major prison organizations, the inmate already knows he's destined for the Security Housing Unit, the SHU. If past behavior includes multiple assaults, weapons manufacturing, or conspiracy activity, the SHU is likely as well. And if the inmate was transferred because he was deemed a program failure, someone who cannot exist safely or peacefully in a general population environment, he will be separated immediately. Meanwhile, officers search every inch of their bodies. Clothing is removed, catalogued, and examined. Tattoos are photographed, especially those indicating gang rank or affiliation. Old scars are documented. New injuries are questioned. The staff needs to know everything, who these men are, what they've done, and what they're capable of inside these walls. Inmates who previously carried themselves with swagger now stand shivering slightly, not just from the cold coastal wind but from the stark shift in power. Pelican Bay is a place where the officers control every second, every movement, every breath of an inmate's day. Once identification and security checks are completed, the inmates are lined up again. Eyes forward, an officer commands. A heavy steel door slides open, revealing the first interior corridor. The sound it makes is unforgettable, a deep, scraping thud that settles into the bones. It's the sound of something closing forever. Inside, fluorescent lights flicker overhead. The floors are polished concrete, marked by years of boots, wheels, and chains. The corridor is wide enough for transport teams but narrow enough to maintain control. Surveillance cameras track each step. As the group moves, the air becomes noticeably colder. Pelican Bay's design includes minimal external windows, and airflow is tightly regulated. The environment feels sterile, almost lifeless, as if intentionally stripping away any sense of humanity. They pass thick steel doors with small reinforced windows. Behind some of them, faces appear, men who've lived here for years, watching new arrivals like spectators at an unending play. Fresh meat, one voice mutters behind the glass. But most stay silent. Pelican Bay residents know better than to draw attention. They've learned the rhythms, the punishments, the unwritten laws of survival in a place with no easy exits. The group finally reaches the intake reception area. Forms are signed. Wristbands changed. Property processed. For a moment, everything feels almost procedural, like any other prison. Then the announcement comes. SHU-bound inmates will be separated. Step to the right. A line of men shifts rightward. Their shackles clink like a metallic sigh. These inmates won't see a general population yard for years, maybe longer. Their world is about to shrink to an 8 by 10 concrete cell and the slow, grinding silence that defines Pelican Bay's most feared unit. For the rest, the officers point ahead. You're going to see facility. Orientation tier. No matter where they end up, one truth becomes unmistakable at this moment. Pelican Bay is not just a prison. It's an environment designed to break patterns, break alliances, and sometimes break people. And for these new arrivals, the process is only just beginning. For most California inmates, a transfer means adjusting to new cellmates, new schedules, and new politics. But at Pelican Bay, orientation is not an introduction, it's a warning, a recalibration, a cold, meticulous evaluation of whether a man can function inside one of the most controlled environments in the country. After intake processing, the inmates designated for general population (GP), a title that means something far different here, are led through a series of tight, echoing hallways. The air is sharp and disinfectant-heavy. The lights buzz faintly overhead as officers guide them toward C facility, the building used to hold new arrivals before they're assigned to permanent housing. Even here at the very beginning, the silence is staggering. In other prisons, the arrival of new inmates sparks noise, shouted questions, greetings, threats, or the distinct clang of bars as prisoners pry for information. But Pelican Bay's design leaves little room for theatrics. Cells are sealed. Doors are thick. The layout intentionally prevents inmates from gathering near railings or communicating easily across tiers. The environment itself imposes discipline. The new arrivals feel it instantly. They're placed in a waiting area of holding cages, 1 man per cage, while staff finalize bed assignments and verify they've been cleared for GP rather than SHU. Each cage has a metal bench, a graded floor, and walls made of reinforced mesh so tight a pencil can't be pushed through. Men sit in silence, some staring at the floor, others watching the officers carefully, reading their posture, their tone, their movements. At Pelican Bay, officers maintain a professional but unmistakably firm presence. There's no room for negotiation, charm, or intimidation. Inmates who attempt any of those quickly learn that this facility treats all forms of manipulation as security threats. After an hour, sometimes longer, the first group is taken to the orientation tier. The moment they step onto the tier, the temperature drops again. Coastal air slips through ventilation systems and sweeps across the concrete floors. The long hallway is lined with metal cell doors, each with a narrow vertical window and a food port that clicks shut with a sound that marks the passage of time like a slow, metallic metronome. One officer stops the line. "Listen up," he says, not raising his voice but commanding full attention. "This isn't like where you came from. You follow the program, you'll be fine. You don't, you'll learn fast or you'll end up in ADSEG or the SHU. A few of the men swallow hard. Program in Pelican Bay doesn't just mean attending yard, chow, or jobs. It means strict compliance. No fighting. No stalling. No violating movement orders. Even small infractions, like covering cell windows, refusing a direct order, or attempting unauthorized communication, can end a man's GP status permanently. Cells are assigned 1 by 1. A steel door slides open just long enough for the inmate to shuffle in. The door closes with an unmistakable impact, heavy, final, echoing along the tier. Inside the cell there's nothing surprising, yet everything feels different. A concrete slab with a thin mattress. A stainless steel combined toilet and sink unit. A shelf. A fluorescent light that flickers on command from the control booth. A small window that offers nothing but sky or the back of another building. For many, the first moment alone is the hardest. The silence lands like a weight. Some sit down immediately, resting their chained hands on their knees, breathing slow to control the rising anxiety. Others walk the length of the cell, counting steps, acquainting themselves with the new reality. Once the officers finish securing the tier, they return for orientation interviews. These are brief but critical conversations conducted through the food port. Questions include: do you have known enemies here? Are you affiliated with any gangs? Do you feel your safety is at risk? Are you able to program on a 180 design facility? The last question matters more than inmates realize. Pelican Bay's GP yards are built on a 180-degree design, meaning inmates move in structured formation, controlled, direct, and always under line-of-sight supervision. Unlike 270-degree or open-pod prisons, 180s offer limited blind spots and almost no opportunity for spontaneous violence. Inmates who cannot follow the structure, whether due to mental health, aggression, or gang instructions, will not last long in GP. Their failures become staff paperwork, and eventually SHU assignments. After the interviews, the staff begin distributing essentials: bedding, clothing, hygiene items, and a small orientation packet outlining rules and schedules. Every item is inspected at the cell door. Even the toothbrushes are security modified: a short handle, flexible plastic, nothing that can be sharpened into a weapon. As the day progresses, the men start hearing the rhythms of Pelican Bay life. Doors opening and closing. Distant announcements over the PA system. The muffled sounds of boots on concrete as officers walk their routes. Occasional shouts from other tiers, quick warnings, coded messages, or simple attempts at communication. Here, inmates quickly learn who controls the flow of information. Shot callers for each major group: Southern Hispanics, Northern Hispanics, African American groups, whites and others, make contact with new arrivals through discreet, highly controlled methods. The culture is disciplined. Pelican Bay is where the highest-level gang members have lived, fought, and strategized for decades. Even in GP, the expectations are rigid. A soft knock from the cell next door signals the first informal welcome. What you program like? It's a simple question, one that determines everything. Program means: do you follow your group's rules? Do you handle your business? Are you reliable? Can you be trusted? No one answers lightly. As evening approaches, officers serve the first meal through the food port, usually something simple like beans, rice, and a small piece of bread. The tray slots shut one by one, each clang echoing up the concrete. Lights dim. The tier quiets. And the inmates lie down on their thin mattresses, staring at the ceiling, listening to the isolation settle around them. Orientation isn't long, maybe a few days, sometimes a week. But it's enough to make one truth clear. Pelican Bay doesn't adjust to you. You adjust to Pelican Bay. Or you disappear into the SHU. For some of the new arrivals, the next phase will be GP housing. For others, the path ahead leads somewhere darker. And soon, one of the men on this bus will learn why his transfer wasn't random, and why someone inside Pelican Bay has been waiting for him. And that is the reality behind the steel gates of Pelican Bay. A place built not just to contain men, but to separate them from everything they once were. From the first shackles on the transport bus to the final slam of a cell door, the journey into California's most unforgiving prison is a reminder that inside this system, nothing is guaranteed. Not safety. Not sanity. Not tomorrow. If this deeper look into the prison pipeline opened your eyes to a world few ever see, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter in our exploration of the hidden stories inside America's toughest prisons. And remember, every transfer, every yard, every locked cell has a story. Some are tragic. Some are brutal. But all of them deserve to be told. Thanks for watching. Stay aware. Stay curious. And I'll see you in the next one.